Good afternoon. We will now reconvene the council meeting today on Monday, September 15th at 1:02 p.m. Councillor Natchop is joining us remotely today, so we will be, as I said earlier, conducting all of our votes as through the clerk with regard to recorded votes, just so we're all above board. We are rising from closed sessions with a report, and before I get into the motion of the report, I just wanted to give a high-level summary about the discussion with regards to the water service disruption in the village of Millbrook last week. So in the early hours of Thursday, September 4th, we experienced a significant water main break, causing a severe depressurization throughout the water system that also created an issue with two water pumps at our wellhead on King Street. Township staff worked to address these two issues throughout the day on Thursday and informed agencies and ministry about this issue that we were dealing with. By approximately 6 p.m. on Thursday, both the break and the system had been repaired and began repressurized and working normally. Then in the early hours of Friday, September 5th, we experienced another significant water main break in the same Dufferin Street area water main. We immediately worked with staff to isolate this break and repair the additional leak in the morning and the early afternoon. And by 5 p.m. on Friday, the water in our system reached a level that allowed us to begin the mandatory testing required in order for the boil water order to be lifted for the local health unit. This testing requires two submissions or rounds of tests conducted 24 hours apart over a 48-hour period. So that was what held us up until Sunday evening at approximately 6:30 p.m., where we received confirmation from public health that our testing results allowed them to issue that the boil water order had been lifted and normal service could resume in the village of Millbrook. So before we get to the motion again, I just want to thank a number of people that worked very urgently to address the emergency circumstance. Obviously, a number of our staff put in some significant hours, including our public works and wastewater department teams. I want to thank all of you for your expertise and professionalism throughout that process. I also want to thank senior staff from the chief of the fire service to also the CAO for their teams and their leadership during our emergency control group meetings. But also want to thank our communications team, Ms. Ayat, who did a stellar job in helping us get out the word, but was also supported by the Parks and Rec staff to facilitate the potable water service and also getting signage out throughout the village and supporting that effort. And also the local agencies that helped us in getting that communication, whether it's community care, the Legion, but also the Lions Club for reaching out in the community and helping share that important information. And lastly, I want to thank Julie and her team from what is now called Lakelands Public Health, that we have the new name with regards to formerly Peterborough Public Health, Lakelands Public Health, for working to ensure the safe restoration of water service in the village of Millbrook. So a big thank you to everyone for all of their urgent and hard work during that emergency. And with that, we do have the report from closed session that council directs staff to transfer funds from the water wastewater capital budget from Frederick Street to the Dufferin Street project in the total amount of $450,000 to be used to complete the reconstruction of the water main and appurtenances on Dufferin Street in 2025, and that council directs staff to transfer the funds from the capital budget for roadworks from Frederick Street to Dufferin Street in the amount of $300,000 to be used to complete the roadworks on Dufferin Street in 2025, and that council directs staff to proceed with the lowest bid from the RFQ for this work not exceeding $750,000. And I have a mover and a seconder for that motion, moved by Councillor Edgerton, second by Councillor Byrne. Recorded vote.
Councillor Edgerton.
Yes.
Mayor Graham.
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Huntley.
Yes.
Councillor Byrne.
Yes.
And Councillor Natchoff.
Yes.
That is carried. Thank you to everyone, and thank you to council for that. We're now moving on to 8.1 in the agenda, which is a presentation from Moya Teo with regards to the Asset Management PSD Citywide 2025 Asset Management Plan. Moya, I believe you're joining us remotely today. Just want to confirm that you can hear me and we can hear you.
Yep, I can hear you there. Can you guys hear me all right?
Okay, we can't quite hear you just yet, so we're going to make just a subtle adjustment here.
Okay.
If you can turn the volume up on your end too, just a little quiet. We can hear you in the distance, but it's a bit faint. So we're just looking.
Okay. Is that any better there?
That is a little better. We're going to make an adjustment now on our end just to turn you up a little bit, and then we'll get you started here.
Yep.
Try one more time for me, Wayne.
Yep. Can any better there now?
Yes, that's good. Okay, I think we're good to go now. Thank you. Sorry for that.
No problem at all. Would you like me to take control, share my screen, or is it going to be changed from your side?
We have the presentation here, so if you just want to say next slide, we'll move along and take your direction that way.
Okay, perfect. Sounds good. So good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much for inviting me here today. My name is Moya Taylor. I'm an asset management advisor with PSD Citywide. I'm the primary consultant that has been working with the township staff to develop this asset management plan. So firstly, before we get started, I would like to say a big thank you to the township staff for all of their cooperation and dedication as we work throughout this project. Today, I will be reviewing the updates that have been made to this plan to ensure it meets legislative requirements for 2025. But before diving into the specifics of the AMP, I just wanted to provide an overview and some context on the project and asset management in general. So the Township of Cavan-Monaghan and PSD Citywide have been collaborating for a number of years now. We've been involved in all the asset management updates since 2013, including the 2024 asset management plan. For our current project, we aim to develop a updated AMP that was compliant with the third leg of Ontario Regulation 58817. And I'll talk a little bit more about the specifics of that regulation in later slides. As part of the current project, we held supporting workshops with staff covering the areas you see here, so inventory, data refinement, and proposed levels of service. Next slide, please. So why the need for municipal asset management? We can acknowledge that municipal infrastructure assets are vital for communities. And from our perspective, we need a way to organize what we own, a way to understand what services we provide through those assets, and a way to ensure accountability to our residents and stakeholders for the services that they're using. These three key objectives are really the driving force behind not only the regulation, but the increased awareness among various stakeholders on the need for asset management. Next slide, please. From a municipal perspective, the value is the level of service we're providing to our residents, and a high-level set of parameters we can use to determine the level of service of a particular system or network is shown here on the screen. So we have the cost. How much will it cost the township to replace or repair a given asset? When will that cost be required? The performance. What is the current output or performance of the asset? Is it in poor shape? And then finally, we have the risk. What is the potential risk of this asset failing? Who will be impacted if it were to fail? And are we able to identify our high-risk assets? Next slide, please. So to fully determine the level of service we are providing, and then to identify the critical steps that are needed to address any potential downturns on the level of service, asset management should be spread throughout the organization. And this starts with the asset portfolio or the asset inventory. In short, the township is working towards establishing a centralized asset inventory that is agreed upon by all stakeholders from finance to public works, and it has the critical data points needed to identify that risk, cost, and performance, and ultimately the level of service. Next slide, please. So Ontario Regulation 58817 has defined requirements for 3 AMP iterations, the first of which was required by July 1st, 2022. That's centered around measuring your current levels of service, defining that asset inventory, the current performance of the assets, the life cycle activities, and the cost to maintain the current levels of service, and also the impacts of growth on current levels of service for your core assets, which included your roads, stormwater, water, wastewater, and bridges. The 2024 requirements were the same as the 2022 requirements. However, that time we also had to analyze the non-core assets, which included your facilities, your vehicles, equipment, and land improvement assets. And the township has met those requirements with the last AMP. For the 2025 iteration of the AMP, we centered around proposed levels of service. So the proposed performance of assets, the life cycle activities, and the cost to achieve the proposed levels of service, an updated financial strategy, and the impacts of growth on proposed levels of service. And this has been achieved with the completion of this AMP. Next slide, please. Then what comes after 2025? So the regulation does require that all AMPs be updated once every 5 years, that council conduct an annual review of its asset management progress on or before July 1st, and that the asset management policy and plan be posted on the municipal website. Next slide, please. The 2025 compliant AMP was developed based on the asset inventory as of December 31st, 2024. This presentation will provide an overview on the current state of municipal infrastructure, provide recommendations to increase confidence in analysis and decision-making, provide the proposed levels of service that the township has selected, and the financial capacity to meet these goals. Next slide, please. So we can see here the replacement cost for each asset category on the screen. And as you can see, the replacement cost of the asset portfolio totals $155.2 million. Now, these estimates are based on 2022 values and reflect the total cost that will be required if the assets were replaced today. Next slide, please. And the primary replacement cost method for each asset category can be seen here. So there is a range of methods to determine the replacement cost of an asset, and some are more reliable and accurate than others. In this AMP, we utilized both user-defined cost and cost per unit and cost inflation or CPI tables. So the user-defined and cost per unit costs are based on costs that are provided by municipal staff from average costs from recent contracts, data from engineering reports and assessments, or staff estimates based on their knowledge and experience. Whereas the cost inflation or CPI tables is when we take the historical cost of the asset and inflate it based on consumer price indexing or non-residential building construction price index. The user-defined costs, when they're based on a reliable source, they're a very reasonable and accurate way to determine asset replacement cost. The cost inflation is typically used in the absence of reliable cost replacement cost data. It is reliable for anything that's been recently purchased or constructed, but as the assets age and new products and technologies become available, cost inflation becomes a less reliable method. The accuracy and the reliability of lifecycle costs is critical for asset management planning. Next slide, please. And here we can see the current conditions of the assets. So the current condition is pretty much central to all of the asset management planning. And you can see here the distribution of the asset condition for the tax-funded assets by asset category, and it's weighted out by replacement cost. And you can see there's 86% of the tax-funded assets are in fair or better condition. Next slide, please. And here we see the overall condition of the water rate funded assets, again, weighted out by replacement cost. And we have 76% of the water rate funded assets are in fair or better condition. Next slide, please. And finally, we have the wastewater rate funded assets. So this is also the condition breakdown for them, weighted by replacement cost, and about 80% of the wastewater rate funded assets are in fair or better condition. Next slide, please. So overall, in total, weighted by replacement cost, as I mentioned, 86% of the tax-funded assets are in fair or better condition. 80% of the rate-funded assets are in fair or better condition, and this results in about 83% of the total asset portfolio reporting in fair or better condition. And based on these values, Cavan Monaghan's asset portfolio is in a better overall position than many municipalities. Next slide, please. So the condition of the assets relied on both age-based and field condition data. The chart displayed here shows the percent of assets that had condition assessments applied and the source of those assessments. So you can see that overall assessed condition data was available for about 26% of assets. For the remaining portfolio, age was used as an approximation of condition. The township is working towards developing a more robust condition assessment program to ensure there's accurate condition information available for future asset management planning. The age-based condition does typically overstate needs and overall deficit, whereas the assessed condition data builds confidence in your decision-making. Next slide, please. So we use that assessed condition data in asset management decision-making to mitigate risks associated with asset failure, to identify the most economic intervention, and to accurately predict the future expenditure requirements. Next slide, please. So you can see here that the township is committing approximately $2.8 million towards capital projects per year from sustainable revenue sources. This includes like CCBF, OSIF, and your tax allocations. This value does not include the transfers to the asset replacement reserves. The average annual requirement for both the tax and rate funded assets to continue to provide the current level of service totals approximately $4.3 million. So this is resulting in an annual deficit of roughly $1.5 million, or put differently, these assets are currently funded at about 44% of their long-term capital requirements. Next slide, please. So the main component of the 2025 requirements was centered around developing proposed levels of service. Understanding the current infrastructure deficit allowed the township to define their proposed levels of service, and this involved reviewing each of the current measured levels of service and determining the following. What is an acceptable level of service? Why is this level deemed acceptable? What is the gap between the current level and the acceptable level? Is the acceptable level achievable? And how affordable for the township is moving towards that acceptable level? Considering all of these factors, the township was able to develop 3 scenarios as potential proposed levels of service and ultimately decide which targets to work towards for their tax and rate funded assets. This involved developing a 10-year forecast showing the investment required and the estimated costs of change to work towards the proposed levels of service. Next slide, please. So the first scenario modeled maintaining existing funding levels. So what this means is there's no increases to tax or rates assumed for the purpose of increasing capital funding. So annual capital allocations for the tax funded assets would remain at the 1.9 million, excluding any transfers to the asset replacement reserve. Water rate funded will remain at 585,000 and wastewater rate funded will remain at 375,000. Next slide, please. The second scenario modeled achieving 100% of the targeted funding in 10 years for tax-funded assets and in 20 years for wastewater assets. So this assumes a gradual tax and rate increases that would stabilize at 100% funding in 10 years for tax-funded and in 20 years for the wastewater assets. The annual tax increases would gradually reach 3.2 million total capital available in 10 years for the tax-funded assets, where the annual wastewater rate increases would gradually reach 741,000 total capital available in 20 years for the wastewater assets. Next slide, please. And finally, scenario 3 modeled achieving 100% of the target funding in 10 years for tax and 20 years for wastewater, same as scenario 2, but we also looked at some targeted conditions for the sidewalks and land improvements. So this scenario, there was only about 51,000 more annually needed. Therefore, the tax and rate increases considered were the same as those for scenario 2. Next slide, please. So while we considered all 3 scenarios and reviewed them, the Township of Cavan-Monaghan has selected scenario 2 as their preferred path forward for tax-funded assets and scenario 1 as their preferred path forward regarding proposed levels of service for water and wastewater assets, which is reflected in the financial strategy and the 10-year capital replacement forecast. The township is currently performing an external rate study to determine the rate increases required for the water and wastewater. So they've therefore opted to maintain existing funding levels for those asset categories, pending the recommendations from the rate study. Next slide, please. So based on the current infrastructure deficit and the selected proposed levels of service, a 1% plus consumer price indexing tax levy increase is required in 2025 to achieve 100% target funding for your tax funded assets in 10 years. So if we consider a CPI inflation of approximately 1.6%, you'd be looking at about a total tax increase of about 2.6% annually for the next 10 years to achieve that proposed level of service. However, this increase does not account for the transfer to the asset replacement reserve. If the historical amount of approximately 2.8 million is transferred to the asset replacement reserve, continues to be approved by council, only the additional 1.6 increase to account for the CPI inflation will be needed to achieve that target funding. And as I mentioned, the water rates and wastewater rates would remain the same, pending the recommendations from the rate study. It's also important to note that these numbers do not factor in any one-time grants or non-sustainable sources of revenue, but these will continue to be an essential source of revenue for investment and capital infrastructure. And also any adjustments to taxes should be supplemented with project prioritization and evaluation of the desired level of service. Next slide, please. So finally, we can look at recommendations and next steps. It is recommended to continue to review and refine the asset inventory in consultation with your internal departments and stakeholders. It's also recommended that a portfolio-wide data governance strategy be implemented in order to increase the accuracy and confidence in the data, and also to develop an established cycle for updating replacement costs and condition in citywide. Finally, it's recommended to review all of the estimated useful lives defined in the tangible capital asset policy as part of a regular policy review. We must also consider continuous improvement and regular review. The AMP is a living document and it should be updated regularly in order to inform your long-term planning. So accordingly, the yearly capital operating budget should include funding for the assessment of the township's assets that will be used for future iterations of the plan. Next slide, please. And that's all for me. Thank you all very much for your time, and I'll now welcome any questions.
Thanks, Moya, for that high-level presentation. We do have a report coming up later in the agenda as well. And as you alluded to, a lot of this discussion really informs a lot of the framework for the budget discussions as well when it comes to the asset replacement reserve, et cetera. But we'll get to that report in due time. But until then, Moya is with us to answer any questions that you might have about the asset management presentation. Deputy Mayor Huntley.
Through you, Chair, to Moira. On one of the slides, you say that we're currently funding at about 44% of our long-term requirements. Does that mean if we were to fund our capital, like or put the 100% into the asset replacement fund, that would be funding our assets at 100%, or will there always be a percent there where we're drawing from reserves and supplementing it? And if so, what is that ratio that we should be looking for?
Yeah, no, based on the current replacement values, if you continue to fund the asset replacement reserve as you have been historically, you would be at 100% of the funding, aside from any, increases you would be required for inflation or increases to operating costs. That's only for capital purposes. But if you continue to allocate the amount that has historically been allocated to the asset replacement reserve, based on the numbers we have calculated, it would be sitting at 100% funding.
Councilor Byrne?
Through the chair, so this regulation 588, does it force us or obligate us to get outside consulting every year going forward, or just every 5 years going forward? And I didn't see anything really that tells me when the items that are listed today as being in some condition, whatever condition, it doesn't matter, when those individual assets would toggle from good to fair. Is that going to just be reviewed on a 5-year cycle?
Yeah, so the annual update that will be required for Ontario Regulation 58817 can be done internally. It's essentially just a checkpoint to see how you guys are doing with your proposed levels of service, and just a report, just an overall review of how you guys are doing with the asset management progress. In 5 years is when the plan would need to be updated. In terms of the condition, Citywide does track the condition of the assets. So, the staff members that have access to Citywide, they're able to go in and review that at any point they would like to. They can run the condition report and see when those assets will go from, say, fair to poor. And it will be depending on the estimated useful life of the specific assets. For example, an asset that has a 10-year lifespan will go to poor a lot quicker than an asset that has a 100-year life cycle.
Yeah, and Jonathan's been doing a lot of the hard work in getting those assets reflected in that software that we're utilizing for managing the asset management. So early kudos to you, Jonathan, to getting that done, because that you need to have it into the system in order for the system to allow you to provide some of that output data that you're looking for. And it's been a significant effort to not automate, but get the program up and running to its fullest extent as we continue to hit those thresholds for required inclusions as well. Other questions, members of council? Councilor Byrne?
Through the chair, the one thing that struck me, the difference between scenario 2 and 3, not in your paperwork, but in the follow-up that's going to come at me later on. They're talking about a 10.3% to get to scenario 2 over a 10-year period, and only 10.5 to get scenario 3, where we're at 100% sooner. And that small difference in that tax increase kind of made me question how that happens.
Yeah, so the difference between scenario 2 and scenario 3, essentially, scenario 2, we set the amount of funding you had available, whereas for scenario 3, Citywide was able to tell us how much you would have to be allocating annually in order to reach these targets. So basically for scenario 3, we weren't looking at 100% condition for the sidewalks or the land improvements, just 65%. So when we were looking at actually funding it at 100%, it kind of kept those conditions around that range anyways, and that's why there wasn't a dramatic increase in the amount of funding that was required in order to reach that scenario 3 as opposed to scenario 2.
Yeah, so the end result for every little asset that might be incorporated isn't 100% at one time. It's always going to be a fluctuating and devaluating or
Yes.
deteriorating, I guess is the appropriate word, condition that we're managing. And that's where the level of service comes in. If you're trying to maintain different assets at a certain level of service, then that's where it influences your higher increased contributions in order to achieving that, right? Yeah, okay. Excellent. Other questions? Councilor Byrne?
Through the chair, for clarity for me, in most of the notes coming up, the wastewater and water portion of our asset management seems to be staying at status quo, and I'm trying to rationalize why that happens.
Yeah, so that was due to the fact that when I was talking with the staff, they indicated that they're going to be doing a rate study, or they're in the process of doing a rate study for the water and wastewater. So essentially just selected to stay the same for the time being, pending the recommendations from that rate study, and then look at implementing the recommendations from the rate study.
Yeah, and the separation is partially justified because, like I said, it's a contained separate economy, so that it's funded not from the levy, so it would be kind of tricky to incorporate a levy implications of asset management for something that's not funded by the levy at all. It's funded from the user rates. What not in the levy though, right? Like that's why, yeah, okay, fair enough.
Yes,
Okay.
yeah. We considered the tax funded assets separate from the rate funded because we looked at the taxes being funded from a taxes point of view, whereas the water, wastewater are being funded from the rates.
Okay. Deputy Mayor?
Through you, Chair, I guess to Moira, when we start planning out, like to fund the assets of the future, are we taking into consideration assets that are going to be coming online in the next 5 years? Like, is that taken into consideration, or is it just file in as we move forward?
Yeah, no, this is only considering assets that you currently have, where it's a snapshot in time. We're just looking at your current asset inventory.
Thank you. Councillor Natchoff, I just wanted to make sure that we didn't miss you with any questions with this virtual.
I've been-
Okay, very good.
Okay, thank you.
Yep, no problem, Councillor. Thank you. Any other questions? If not, we're just receiving this. As I mentioned, this is an ongoing effort. We have the report that we're going to get from Jonathan and staff in a little bit, but this is obviously going to be an ongoing project that influences a lot of Kimberly's work with regards to the budget. So we'll look forward to that as well. I get a motion to receive the report, moved by Deputy Mayor Huntley, seconded by Councillor Byrne. All in favor? Sorry, we need a recorded vote. I forgot again.
Counselor Natchoff,
Yes.
Counselor Edgerton,
Yes.
Counselor Byrne,
Yes.
Mayor Graham,
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Huntley.
Yes.
That is approved. Thank you, Moya, for your help in guiding us through this update, and I'm sure we'll be hearing from you again.
Thank you.
Next up on the agenda, we have a number of different sets of minutes. So 9.1 is that the minutes from the regular meeting held September 2nd be approved as presented. Can I get a mover and a seconder for that? Moved by Councillor Byrne, seconded by Councillor Edgerton. Recorded vote.
Deputy Mayor Huntley,
Yes.
Counselor Byrne,
Yes.
Counselor Edgerton,
Yes.
Counselor Natchoff,
Yes.
Mayor Graham.
Yes. Those are approved, and we have another set of minutes from the Cavan Monaghan Accessibility Advisory Committee. We're just looking from the July 23rd meeting be approved as presented. I'm going to move in a seconder for those minutes. Moved by Councillor Byrne, seconded by Councillor Edgerton. Recorded vote.
Mayor Graham,
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Huntley,
Yes.
Counselor Natchoff,
Yes.
Counselor Edgerton,
Yes.
and Counselor Byrne.
Yes.
Those are approved. Thank you, council. Moving on, reports 11.1 is the alluded to finance 2025-09 asset management plan update. We have a crew to walk us through this report, I believe, starting with Ms. Pope.
Thank you, Council. We have this report before you. I just wanted to highlight the fact that although it became legislation in 2009 for municipalities to actually enter into recording for assets in this manner, this municipality had started 3 to 5 years beforehand with collecting data to prepare for that. And as per the report states, it just talks about the different levels, the stages and the phases that we've been through. We were very excited to welcome Jonathan at the beginning of this year, as he has given that specific insight and then attention to detail that has worked with the senior level of the management team to ensure that our assets are accurate, if there are any areas that we can improve on. And you allude both in the presentation and the comments from council about how this document will now fashion and work through our budget annually as we move forward. Really important document. So we're really thrilled today to reach this point. And Jonathan has provided excellent details in that. In addition to, I just wanted to highlight a few things. In the findings that Moya has now presented, she reiterated about water wastewater that we're staying as a pause. We're just holding until the next rate comes out. And for the tax funding, I thank you for the question about the asset management reserve, because if we were to fund the asset management transfer every year that is suggested through the budget, that's 100% of the depreciation level. But as mentioned before, it never ever covers the CPI or the cost indices. So this is just highlighting that that's an area that we can improve on moving forward if we have the funding and it can work with the budget. That is fantastic. This AMP also supports that as we move forward. And the question about future assets, we don't know when they'll come online. It's different than the development charges or user fees where we're forecasting and getting ready for those things, but at least managing what we have today. And if we continue to use the depreciation levels, when we take a new asset on, those depreciation values will come into place when we're bringing those discussions forward to council. And another exciting thing that we have coming up is in this reiteration of 2026 budget that we'll be discussing, and in future years, there is a budget software part of the citywide asset management plan that we've been excited to be able to use and launch and haven't been able to, and we had until we had this data in there. So that's new for us. You'll see peaks of it in this year's budget and hopefully full on onboarding by the next budget. So we're really thrilled about that as well. So that's just from the finance perspective, really excited to have my team members, always thankful to work with Wayne, the Director of Public Works, and his entire team, but also just all of our management team. So thankful to have a team that we have here, and of course with the direction from our CAO. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Pope. Questions with regards to the report itself? Councilor Byrne.
Through the chair to Ms. Pope. On page 54 of my notes, 12 of your notes, it talks about the Institute of Asset Management. What is that and who runs it?
It- 96 in the agenda?
Thank you. This is actually an institute that emphasizes the alignment. This was brought in just for further clarification within the report that it's not just ad hoc rules or selected by different municipalities. There's actually an institute with recommendations. I know Maya stayed on the call because it's written right into the asset management plan if you needed more detail than that. But it's for standardizing and making sure that across municipalities that we are recognizing our assets appropriately.
I can just add to that as well. It's essentially it's where all the professional bodies, it's our institute of professional bodies that kind of set the standards for us and the best practices that we follow along with.
Yeah. Follow up, Councilor Byrne?
Through the chair, on page 70, it mentions a maintenance module. Is that some new computer program that we're going to have to invest in, or second paragraph?
Thank you. We've been using Citywide database ever since we started the asset management program, and then council approved us to purchase that software. So it continues to be used for the asset management plans as we update them, and now we're fully rolling in and using it. So it's really referring to that database that we now have as a one collection unit. We don't have to purchase new. We had already previously purchased the budget program. That's the piece that I'm talking about. You'll be seeing more information from that, but you don't have to purchase anything new for that. That's already incorporated in what we have today.
Thank you, Ms. Pope. Other questions? Yep. Councilor Edgerton has a question. We're just going to get him set up.
Daughter here now. Okay, on page 1, to you, Mr. Chair, to everybody, page 130, it lists the number of vehicles we have. It says the fire service has 21, heavy vehicles 14, and light duty vehicles 30. I got a little bit of understanding how they come up with that. That's not all vehicles.
You are absolutely correct. It's more about components, but where Jonathan has been entering this data, I believe he is prepared to speak to this question.
Yes, through the mayor to Councillor Edgerton. Yes, much of the assets within the fleet section is components of the vehicles, such as for instance, the fire trucks, such as the brushes, the ladders, items like that that are attached to the specific vehicle. Because when we sell that vehicle, I know those don't go with it, but we'll be attaching to another vehicle. So those are items that are just added to those.
So is there some sort of, I think in the discussion I have with Councillor Edgerton, I just want to just clarify. So is it something about the legislative reporting requirement? Like, to me, those sound like equipment or fixtures or other, come up with any sort of, other word for it than a fleet, because it is a bit misleading when you think about that application across the board. It kind of insinuates there's all these vehicles sitting around that we don't even have enough staff for, which is kind of a misleading statement. So can you provide any clarity a bit more as to, why is it captured that way, or is it a requirement, or how can we maybe clarify to members of the public who want to interpret this document and understand what we're doing, that's not the case?
Yes, and through you to council. So as Moya has stated before, that this is a living document, this is something that I can update as we go forward so that it is more concise and understanding. I can't speak for Moya, unfortunately, to get this updated, to change that, to have like a little note added, but that's something maybe I could suggest before we officially post it.
I can certainly get that note added in there, no problem.
Okay, thanks, Moya. I just think it's helpful for interpretation purposes. It's quite misleading. I understand that, we're still working our way into this more automated system, so there's going to inevitably be things that need to be adjusted. But I think it would be helpful if at all possible. So thanks for taking that back.
No
All the
problem.
questions I got, we'll do Deputy Mayor and then Councillor Byrne.
Thank you, and through you, Chair. Back to the scenarios that we have, and I get, scenario one's, keep it as it is, and scenario two is the 100%. Scenario three is a little bit more than 100%, just, kind of paying more attention to what the assets are doing, which I personally, I believe is the right way to do it, even though it costs a little bit more. But I guess my question with that one is, does it come with a lot more or a little more, or like, is there more administrative overhead to keep track of what's going on? Or is that what, the new software modules will take care of for you? So like what's the difference between scenario two and scenario three in that sense? Because you still have your assets going from poor to bad to, or other way around, I guess, bad to poor to, good and that sort of stuff. But so it's already being monitored. So what's the difference in scenario three? Like, is it just there's more human monitoring of what's going on with those assets, or help me understand that, please?
I can take that one. So basically, the biggest difference between scenario 2 and scenario 3 is just that there is going to be more funding available, so that when the replacement events or the life cycle events are scheduled to occur, the funding is there to perform them. So basically, instead of being skipped and put into the backlog, that will then be performed in order to increase the overall condition. In terms of, I guess, administrative, that is something that would have to be documented within Citywide. So essentially, we're able to build out the schedule, the life cycle events that are going to be applied to, say, the sidewalks or the land improvements. But when they actually occur, they do have to be entered into the system as in they were completed, in order for the system to pick that up, that it was completed, and to update the condition for that.
Thanks for that, Moya. Councillor Byrne.
Through the chair, so on page 71, on the same note that the confusion about how many vehicles we own, it mentions things in kind of a broad term, bridges and culverts. I was under the impression that most of the things that are defined as a bridge belong to the county. We do have cement culverts and we do have galvanized culverts, and now we're putting in some plastic. But it's saying there's 10 years remaining, but I know in fact that this past week or more, our township has been replacing culverts, so I'm wondering, that seems confusing to me.
Through the chair to Councillor Burns. So under this, it's for the crossroad culverts. That's what's labeled under this section. And you are correct that the bridges are through the county. So they're not attributed to any of this here.
It's just the same line would be for both types of asset, but in our case, there's far more that would be culverts than that. Ms. Pope wants to expand on that.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor. I just wanted to clarify that this is based on 2024 data. 2025 data is going in, so any of the recent changes wouldn't be in there as of yet, but that's why it's so crucial that we use this during the budget process. We pull out that data that's current, then we feed back into the data the next year as we're going to move forward with the changes. So this is a living document that's kind of like, it's always moving and always growing. And so annually, you'll get a taste of what's happening with the AMP as we go through the budget. And then once every 5 years, you'll get an update similar to this. It's just important to note that we're working on 2024 fixed numbers at this time because we have to break at some point to be able to report to you the data. And that was the most completed year that we could provide to you.
Thanks, Ms. Pope. Moya, I have a question that might be more suited to you in your sort of line of work. I just didn't know, we're often, asset management is a relatively new phenomenon, even though it, like I said, it's been legislatively around since '09, which is in the municipal world is still relatively adolescent at best. I'm just curious if you have sort of any understanding or any sort of comparables with regards to, we're always trying to gauge in comparison, like the 80 percentile, that's a good number. We can understand that. But we always come up against the sort of financial pressures when it comes to asset management investment, because there is a balance between existing ratepayers covering the cost of, of future infrastructure upgrades that will be around for, in some cases, 50 to 70 years of future, once they're replaced, for future assets that will then have to be re-added on over that horizon. We didn't have that runway of 50 to 70 years to save for any of the infrastructure that we're currently working on. So I'm just, maybe the most poignant way to ask the question is, if we're in that 80 to 83 percentile, like given the market or other municipalities, whether it's the province, or I don't know if you do this sort of nationally, can you give us sort of a gauge as to where that sort of fits us with regards to this sort of effort?
Yeah, absolutely. So I can say with 100% certainty that you guys are in a lot better position than the most municipalities we work for. The presentations that I presented, the tax and rate increases that I presented for you guys are a lot lower than most of the other municipalities we're dealing with. And as you said, a lot of times that is just due to the fact that you're trying to balance those increases with, affordability to the residents. And when you're dealing with smaller municipalities that don't really have the resources, unfortunately, things kind of do just fall through the crack. And for a lot of municipalities, it is just a case of you run it until you can't anymore, and then you replace it. So for you guys, you do have a great asset management program in place. I know Jonathan's doing a lot of work behind the scenes. So I hope that answers the question, but you guys are doing really well in terms of asset management planning.
No, I think it's helpful, and thanks for the more recent contribution, Jonathan. It's great to have it automized, but I have to give previous councils and senior staff, and Kimberly's been here for a lot of it, and taking that initiative and making sure that we're in as good standing position as we are, because like you said, it's not an easy thing to increase taxes to save money towards the existing infrastructure. It's not a motivating factor. It's not always an acceptable vernacular, but given the legislative requirements and the relatively newness of it, I think it's an important message that we are trying to catch up from an instance where this was never required prior to 2009. So it is a bit of a rock and a hard place, but it's good to hear from a market standpoint anyway, we're doing fairly well. Other questions with regards to the report? Councilor Byrne.
Through the chair to maybe Jonathan, on page 73, I'm trying to make sense of that graph and why there's big upticks in water at some point and a huge backlog in wastewater.
Through Mr. Mayor to Councilor Byrne, we have an uptake in wastewater. It shows in 2029. That's primarily due to some of the growth scenarios that we're dealing with on, this is development and our plant expansions and things of that nature. So we had the master servicing plan that we looked at previously, and we had identified some needs. Now those are for the most part funded by development charges, but you see a significant uptake related to our growth scenario and what we had projected for future population. So that overlaps into some of our costs going forward into the future. So you'll see where this was looking at a plant expansion particular, and it was talking in the millions of dollars at that point. So that's one of the scenarios. I mean, we have a variety that were identified. I think we've also talked, of course, about water, and we've talked about what we're trying to do with that, and that we'll present more information on that once we get to the rate study.
Sorry, so basically what you're suggesting, Wayne, is this is just a loose forecast based on the capital reinvestment that will be required over time. And based on asset management planning, there are certain pieces of infrastructure that will need significant investment over time, depending on, like you said, the myriad of variables, including growth, including deterioration. Like you said, certain areas that are, it's not always the oldest piece of infrastructure that fails. It's, there's a lot of risk associated with that, but thanks for clarifying that. Councilor Byrne.
Through the chair to that same note, so that dotted red line, the annual, that were the average annual requirements, are they at that level because of these predicted down the road high expenses I remember it being discussed that it might be necessary to have at least 1 or 2 upgrades if the future expansion goes the way it wants for wastewater. Where are we at with what we're actually spending now on that red dotted line?
I think it's important just to note that this plan is looking at what we currently own and replacing what we currently own in the future, right? For when it's time. This isn't the development charges or the user fee study that's talking about what we need in that next 10 and 20-year horizon. That looks at what we're adding to the infrastructure. So this is taking what we have today and what we need to plan for to replace it. What it does is it averages it out, same like for the user fees, it averages it out to show you what we need for the annual investment. And then those portions either go, depending on which side of the fence you're on, if it's tax funded, to the asset replacement reserve. If not, it goes to the wastewater reserve, and they're held there for the year in which they occur. And that's so that you don't hit the spike in 2029 with crazy user fees and then you drop down again. So in all studies and all rates, it's always smoothed out. So that's more what you're looking at with the dotted line.
Follow up, Councilor Byrne.
Yes, through the chair. So on page 149, it talks about the replacement cost, I think, to the standpipe that exists out behind what I jokingly refer to here as City Hall, but out behind us right now. And that kind of shocked me when we're talking about a $15 million expense to put up a new water storage facility. If we went with a water tower up near the 115, if we can replace the one out back at that cheap a price, could we not build a second one right beside it?
So I'll just note, are we talking about the mains line there? This 15 million for the mains.
Kimberly? Oh, sorry.
Sorry, Moya, you were clarifying that we're looking at page 107 of the report, the $15.4 million on the mains?
Yes, yeah, that's what I was clarifying. Yeah.
Okay, so would you like to speak to that?
Yeah, I just wanted to mention that is a CPI inflation value. So that was based on the historical cost. And as I mentioned in the presentation, that a lot of times that isn't necessarily accurate depending on, how far in the past that was installed. So because that is dependent on CPI values, it's likely that the replacement cost today would be higher than that, depending on how long ago that was installed.
Thanks, Moya. Other questions? Seeing none, like I said, this is, especially when it comes to the water infrastructure, we're gonna have a lot more information on this with regards to the rate study update, as well as the additional components and discussions that we'll be doing in that regard. So this is sort of an overarching overview, but it is the sort of foundation or framework in which we come up with these budget discussions and come up with the strategies and how to finance year in, year out, what we're contributing annually to the asset replacement plan. So thanks for everyone's hard work. Oh, Councilor Byrne, question?
Through the chair, you jumped a little bit. I didn't get a chance to catch up. So on page 122, it identifies one play space in the township. I just wonder what that play space is and why we only have one.
So the play space is the OMS skateboard play space is what's showing on Citywide from my side.
Can you say that again, Moya? I just couldn't quite hear it.
Yeah, the OMS skateboard play space.
Right, so that's the area right behind the old Novick School. I don't know why it meets the designation of a play space, but that's, I guess, why it's called that, and that's the cost of replacement. Yeah. Ms. Pope?
Just for clarification, this is under land improvements, not equipment. And so because a play space, because of the groundwork and what have you, that's the reason, but it doesn't replace the equipment on the other slides with regards to playground equipment.
Through the chair to Kimberly, I'm guessing on page 196 in the numbers, the totals, I'm thinking that's just a rounding error that we've talked about before, but I just wanted to make sure of that. On the totals on the top, they don't add up top to bottom.
So are you looking at 2026, I believe, 20 or 2025? The 21 and 29? And it looks like 2025. This is exported out from Citywide, but maybe Moya can speak to that.
Yeah, we're just talking about the 2025 wastewater total there?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, that is just a case of rounding. So when the 21 was rounded, it was rounded down probably, as opposed to going up, and that's all that is there. It would be, you know, there's more decimal places to the numbers, just in the sense of conciseness. That's how we displayed them. But yeah, that's what's going on there. It's just the rounding.
Thank you for that, Moya. One more, Councilor Byrne?
So the next page, 197, it talks about a 72,000 or 72K backlog in fire hall. Is that the equipment? I'm hoping it's not the building.
Through you, Mayor, that currently is for the HVAC system and some other items within the fire hall number 2.
Thanks, Jonathan. Okay. The two recommendations in the report are as follows, just bear with me. That council support the updated asset management plan, which includes revised service levels, life cycle management strategies, financial planning, and funding sources in accordance with Ontario Regulation 58817, and that senior staff will review the asset management plan annually during the budget process to address and implement the recommendations contained within the plan. Mover and a seconder for those two recommendations. Moved by Deputy Mayor Huntley, seconded by Councillor Edgerton. Recorded vote.
Councillor Byrne,
Yes.
Councillor Natchoff,
Yes.
Mayor Graham,
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Huntley,
Yes.
Councillor Edgerton.
That is. Next on the item is 11.2, report and capital status. Ms. Hurley, anything to report?
Good afternoon, Council. Just to give you a couple items just for update, we are very close with regards to the OMS upgrades for the funding that we received. I just want to let everyone know, thank you, everyone that is there. We do thank you for your patience on the renovation kind of work that we're doing. The roof's been repaired. We have HVAC in. The challenge that we've been having is actually the flooring. If you can imagine, it's taking quite some time with regards to sanding and replacing some of those boards. So bear with us, but we are working to try to get that project completed by the end of the year. The other question that was asked is regarding the crosswalk, the Cenotaph crosswalk. We're hoping to have that in by the end of September, 1st of October. Again, we're just confirmation on actually zeroing in on a date, but we're hoping to be close on that. If there's any other questions, I'm happy to give anyone an update.
Thank you, Ms. Hurley. Questions with regards to the CAO report and project status? Councilor Byrne.
Through the chair to Wayne Hancock, I think, I just wonder where we're at with the paving repairs that have been done on Bland Line and Hayes Line and where things are at with that, please.
Through Mr. Mayor to Councillor Byrne. First of all, we had, I think indicated previously, we're waiting for a third-party professional report. We have not received the details of that yet. So it was to be with us by the end of last week, by Friday. So we're hoping to have it within the next day or so. And subject to those recommendations, we're going to review that internally, and then we'll reach back out to the contractor. Right now, the payments for the works are on hold. We haven't done anything for processing because we're not, I think we believe there's some deficiencies that need to be corrected, and we're looking for the right action. So right at this point, we're just waiting for that third-party report.
Follow up, Councilor Byrne?
Through the chair, not exactly. I was curious about the new signage out on Highway 28 in Baileyboro on our west side of the road for no parking along where they're started to reopen the store and trying to get that little ship truck going. And then we've put up signage in the last little while saying no parking. I wasn't sure where that process all came into play.
That's a county road, so that would be a county signage requirement. No. No. Yeah. Okay. Any other questions with regards to that? Seeing none, can I get a mover and a seconder for that status report for information? Moved by Deputy Mayor Huntley, seconded by Councillor Edgerton. Recorded vote.
Councillor Edgerton. Mayor Graham,
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Huntley,
Yes.
Councillor Byrne,
Yes.
Councillor Natchoff.
You're just muted, Lance, so we need one more click.
Yes.
That is approved. Council committee verbal reports. I know we're just getting some of our committees back underway. Does anyone have a committee report? Councilor Byrne.
Through the chair, I just wanted to acknowledge a lot of the local farmers. They did a tractor parade this past Monday or Sunday just gone by. And I want to give a shout out. It was a well attended and a very neat function that they've done annually. And just think it's a great thing for our agricultural community to be involved in.
Thanks, Councilor Byrne. With regards to my committee update, so we did have the first library board meeting. Oh, Lance, you have one too. Sorry, I'll finish mine and then I'll go to you. Sorry about that. The library board did meet and we discussed obviously the budget submission that had to come in, the initial one for today. We talked about the updates with regards to the renovations, and we're still working through a couple of other interesting marketing ideas that will be shared probably during the budget discussion as well. So that's my update from there. But Councillor Natchoff, over to you for your committee update.
Thank you through you, Chair. Not a committee update, but just a thank you to the staff and to the public health department in conjunction with the water main pipe. Just from I did mention it in closed session, but I just being a business owner, both the the township and public health were fantastic with communicating with the businesses and tried to mitigate the closures or to help them reopen as quickly and safely as possible. And then as well, just from hearing from the constituents in Millbrook most directly affected by the water outage, and just a thank you to the staff and everyone for their hard work. Otherwise, that was all. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Natchoff. Can I get a motion of council to receive those updates? Moved by Councillor Burns, seconded by Councillor Edgerton. All in favor, recorded vote.
Counselor Natchoff,
Yes.
Counselor Edgerton,
Yes.
Counselor Byrne,
Yes.
Mayor Graham,
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Huntley.
Yes.
That is approved. There is no general business. There is no correspondence for information. There is no correspondence for action. When we move to the bylaws, that bylaw number 2025-42 being a bylaw to authorize the sale of land is described as part lot 12, concession 6 being parts 1, 2, and 3, plan 45R 17774 in the geographic township of Cabot-Monaghan. Sorry, I'm Cabin now in the township of Cabot-Monaghan. We've read it first, second, third time past this 15th day of September, signed by the mayor and the clerk, and the corporate seal attached thereto. Can I get a mover for that bylaw? Moved by Councillor Burns, seconded by Deputy Mayor Huntley. Recorded vote.
Deputy Mayor Huntley,
Yes.
Counselor Byrne,
Yes.
Counselor Edgerton,
Yes.
Counselor Natchoff,
Yes.
Mayor Graham.
Yes, that is approved. There is no unfinished business. Any notices of motion number provided. The confirming bylaw, that bylaw number 2025-43 being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of the meeting held September 15th, be read a first, second, third time and passed this 15th day of September, signed by the mayor and the clerk, and the corporate seal attached thereto. Making a mover for the confirming bylaw. Moved by Councillor Burns, seconded by Councillor Edgerton. Recorded vote.
Mayor Graham,
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Huntley,
Yes.
Counselor Natchoff,
Yes.
Counselor Edgerton, and Counselor Byrne.
Yes.
That is carried. Lastly, we need a motion for adjournment and another recorded vote for it too. Moved by Councillor Burns, seconded by Councillor Edgerton. Recorded vote.
Counselor Byrne,
Yes.
Counselor Natchoff,
Yes.
Mayor Graham,
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Huntley,
Yes.
and Counselor Edgerton.
Thank you for that. We have a number of upcoming events. I'll read them aloud. The Municipal Revitalization and Heritage Advisory Committee meeting next is scheduled for Thursday, September 18th at 9 a.m. The Cabot-Monaghan Accessibility Advisory Committee meeting is Thursday, September 18th at 1:30 p.m. The Millbrook Valley Trails Advisory Committee meeting is Monday, September 22nd at 4 p.m. The Millbrook Water Storage Class Environmental Public Information Center, Wednesday, September 24th from 4 p.m. to 6 p.m. at the Township Office. Sustainability Advisory Committee meeting is Thursday, September 25th. The next regular council meeting is Monday, October 6th at 1 p.m. And the Your Township, Your Team Wednesday, October 8th open house is scheduled from 3 to 6 p.m. at the CMCC Community Hall. We look forward to seeing you there. And I think one item that's not on the list, just not to upset the apple cart, is the plowing matches occurring at the French Farm at the end of September. So we want to make sure that we get an acknowledgement to that, and hopefully we'll have some representation from County Council as well. Look forward to seeing everyone in the township. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.